Something extraordinary happened inside the Cleveland Browns training facility this week. Not a trade, not a scandal, just a single practice. One that flipped the entire quarterback hierarchy upside down before anyone could process what was happening. From the very first throw, you could feel it. The kind of energy that doesn't belong to a rookie still trying to find his place, but to a player who already knows he belongs. The atmosphere shifted before a pass was even thrown, subtle at first, like static in the air right before a storm. Coaches leaned in. Teammates paused mid-stretch. Even the veterans, the ones who've seen it all, stopped joking around. Because something about Shedeur Sanders' presence felt different. This wasn't just another practice rep. This was a statement. Every franchise talks about competition, about open quarterback battles, and earning your spot. But what unfolded on that field didn't feel like competition. It felt like coronation. A young quarterback stepping into an NFL practice field for the first time, and in the span of one afternoon, making the entire building question everything they thought they knew about the depth chart, the offense, and even the future of the franchise itself. Whispers spread quickly. Players on the sideline exchanged glances that said everything words couldn't. Some smiled, some shook their heads, others simply stared, wide-eyed, as if witnessing something they'd only ever heard about in stories. That rare moment when a rookie doesn't just compete with the veterans, he takes over the room completely. And the craziest part? Shedeur Sanders didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His performance did all the talking. Before the afternoon was over, the mood in Cleveland would change permanently. What started as a routine practice turned into an organizational earthquake. A silent but undeniable announcement that the Browns' next chapter might have just begun. Because when Shedeur Sanders took the field that day, he didn't just throw passes. He threw down a challenge to the entire NFL. And from the way that field erupted, you could tell everyone felt it. Before that Thursday practice, most people inside the Browns organization already had their minds made up. The quarterback competition was, at least unofficially, settled. Dillon Gabriel, the steady, system-ready passer who'd impressed scouts with his accuracy and maturity, was expected to start. The plan was simple. Let the rookie, Shedeur Sanders, develop quietly behind the scenes, study the playbook, adjust to the speed of the NFL, and maybe earn a real shot a year or two down the road. On paper, it made sense. Gabriel was experienced, polished, the safe option. Shedeur, on the other hand, was the unknown, talented but untested at the professional level, carrying the spotlight of a famous last name and the pressure that came with it. Critics labeled him as raw, analysts said he needed time, some even questioned whether his college domination could translate to the pros. But if you followed Shedeur's journey, none of that noise is new. He spent his entire career walking into rooms filled with doubt and walking out having changed the entire conversation. From Jackson State to Colorado, he didn't just play quarterback, he owned the moment. Every time the stage got bigger, so did his composure. That calm, confident demeanor wasn't arrogance, it was control. Still, the NFL isn't college football. The league has a way of humbling even the most hyped prospects. Coaches knew that. Reporters knew that. Even some teammates probably expected Shedeur to struggle at first, to make rookie mistakes, to learn the hard way how different this level really is. That's why Thursday's practice wasn't supposed to be special. It was supposed to be routine. A few drills, a little competition, another quiet step in a long developmental process. But when Shedeur stepped onto that field, something about the atmosphere shifted. The rookie who was supposed to be learning looked like he'd been running the offense for years. Every movement was smooth, deliberate, efficient. He didn't look nervous. He looked inevitable. And as the first snaps began, one thing became clear to everyone watching. This wasn't a kid adjusting to the NFL. This was a quarterback announcing he'd already arrived. The front office didn't see that coming. The coaching staff didn't see that coming. But by the end of that session, nobody in Cleveland could ignore what they'd just witnessed. Because Shedeur Sanders wasn't following the script they'd written for him, he was rewriting it entirely. From the first rep, it didn't feel like a rookie walkthrough. It felt like a showcase. The offense lined up for their first 7-on-7 series, the kind of segment meant for rhythm building and mechanical fine-tuning. But within seconds, it was obvious. Shedeur Sanders wasn't there to tune up. He was there to take over. The first snap, crisp, effortless. He dropped back, scanned the field, and fired a perfect seam route between two closing defenders. The ball didn't wobble, it didn't sail, it sliced through the air with precision that caught everyone off guard. The receiver didn't even break stride, just turned his head and found the ball waiting, right where it needed to be. Gasps rippled through the sideline.
Then came the second throw, a back-shoulder dart to the far sideline. The timing was ridiculous. The defender's coverage was tight enough to smother most quarterbacks, but Shedeur's anticipation made it look easy, dropping the ball right over the defender's shoulder like it had been scripted by geometry itself. The offensive unit erupted. Teammates who'd barely spoken during warm-ups were suddenly shouting, clapping, bumping helmets. You could feel the confidence surge through the group like an electric current. Third throw, a deep dig over the middle. Shedeur dropped back, paused, and layered the pass over linebacker depth so perfectly that the entire offense audibly reacted. A mix of shock and respect echoed through the field. By the time the receiver hauled it in, half the sideline was already yelling his name. The coaches exchanged looks, the kind that said everything without a word. You could almost hear the quiet acknowledgement. This isn't normal. And then came the fourth completion. A roll to his left, pressure closing in, pocket collapsing. Most rookies would have dumped it off, played it safe. Instead, Shedeur snapped his hips, squared his shoulders mid-motion, and rifled the ball across his body to a receiver streaking toward the hash marks. The placement? Surgical. The result? Another eruption from the offense. By the time he threw his fifth consecutive completion, a laser between two defenders that left even the defensive backs shaking their heads, the tone of practice had completely shifted. Nobody was coasting anymore. Every player on that field was locked in, feeding off the energy radiating from one man under center. It wasn't loud confidence, it wasn't ego, it was control. Shedeur wasn't just running plays, he was orchestrating tempo. His cadence snapped with precision, his body language commanded attention, and his poise made the entire operation look smoother than it had all offseason. And the craziest part? He made it look easy. Reporters watching from the sidelines started typing faster. Coaches folded their arms, trying not to show surprise. Even the defense, normally chirpy and combative, started to quiet down. There's something about dominance that silences a room. And by the time Shedeur finished that series, silence was exactly what filled the air. Everyone felt it. That unspoken understanding that something had just shifted inside the Cleveland Browns facility. Because that wasn't just an impressive rookie showing. That was a franchise moment. The kind of day that players remember for years. The kind that gets talked about in locker rooms long after the season ends. And somewhere on that field, Dillon Gabriel, the man who was supposed to be the starter, was watching it all unfold in real time. He wasn't just seeing completions. He was watching his job dissolve one perfect throw at a time. When Shedeur finally stepped aside and it was Dillon Gabriel's turn to take over, the energy on the field shifted immediately, and not in a subtle way. Moments earlier, the offense had been buzzing. You could feel momentum radiating through every huddle. But as Gabriel jogged in, helmets tilted, voices quieted, and the hum of anticipation turned into something heavier. It was as if the entire field collectively exhaled and braced for reality to hit. Gabriel lined up for his first rep, eyes darting across the defense. The snap came clean, but the throw didn't. The ball arrived late, forcing the receiver into an awkward body adjustment just to make contact. The pass hit fingertips, spun upward, and dropped harmlessly into the turf. Coaches stayed quiet. Teammates offered polite claps, but you could feel it. That subtle awkwardness when everyone knows something's off, but no one says it out loud. His second attempt came quicker, maybe rushed. a short curl route designed for rhythm. Instead, the ball skipped before reaching the target, bouncing twice before rolling to a stop. The crowd didn't react this time. The sound that followed wasn't disappointment, it was silence. Even the defensive backs didn't bother celebrating. They just glanced at each other, half smirking, half shrugging, as if they already knew how this story was going to end. Then came the third throw. The route developed perfectly, timing crisp, separation clean. It should have been easy, but Gabriel's pass floated high, trailing behind the receiver's shoulder. The ball slipped off the fingertips, killing any chance for yards after catch. The receiver jogged back slowly, head tilted toward the ground, eyes hidden behind his visor. The unspoken frustration was starting to build. And then the fourth rep, the one that broke whatever was left of the illusion. Gabriel dropped back, misread the coverage, and released a throw straight toward a linebacker sitting in zone. The defender nearly picked it off. The defensive sideline erupted, laughter, yelling, a few taunts that echoed across the field. It wasn't cruel, it was real. The kind of raw reaction you can't hide when competitiveness takes over.
On the offensive sideline, heads started shaking. Not dramatic, just subtle. Small gestures of recognition. A few players exchanged quiet comments under their breath. Others just stared straight ahead, trying not to make eye contact. Even the veteran wideout who'd been vocal minutes earlier didn't say a word. He just jogged back to the huddle, eyes fixed on the grass, shoulders tight. Meanwhile, at midfield, Shedeur stood silently, helmet tucked under his arm, chin slightly raised. He didn't smirk, didn't comment, didn't move, but his eyes tracked every detail, every wobble, every mistimed read, every sign that the job was already his, even if the organization hadn't said it yet. And that's what made it worse. Gabriel wasn't just battling accuracy issues, he was battling presence, the kind of presence that fills a room without a word, the kind that demands respect simply by existing in the moment. You can't coach that, you can't teach that. You either have it or you don't. By the end of his set, Gabriel looked rattled. He tapped his helmet, muttered to himself, and walked toward the sideline, breathing heavily. Coaches spoke quietly, choosing their words carefully. But the tone had changed. This wasn't evaluation anymore, it was confirmation. Everyone watching could feel it. The comparison wasn't even fair. The gap was too obvious, too wide, too undeniable. And somewhere in that still air, as players reset for the next period, one thought started spreading silently across the field. The quarterback battle wasn't a storyline anymore. It was a conclusion, waiting to be announced. When the offense huddled for the next series, you could feel the mood. The chatter was gone, the laughter from earlier had turned into something else entirely. Anticipation maybe, even disbelief. Everyone had just watched Dillon Gabriel struggle through the kind of practice that exposes more than it hides. But now the rookie was stepping back in. And something about the way Shedeur walked to the line told everyone this was about to get serious. The play call came through. A simple open field concept, nothing flashy, but the moment the ball hit his hands, Shedeur flipped a switch. His dropback was smooth, effortless. His eyes darted left, froze the safety, then snapped back to the right and delivered a laser between the corner and the linebacker. First down, clean, efficient, like clockwork. Second play, tempo picked up. No hesitation, Shedeur adjusted the formation, pointed once toward his receiver, and the entire offense shifted in sync. The snap came, pressure crashed in, and he fired off a strike to the slot receiver cutting across the middle. The ball hit chest level, perfect rhythm, no wasted motion. Another first down. The sideline started buzzing again, quietly at first, then louder. Third play action fake. Shedeur rolled right, eyes still scanning as the defense bit hard on the run. He stopped on a dime, planted his foot, and threw across his body. A risky move for most quarterbacks, but somehow the ball sliced through the air like a guided missile, hitting his tight end near midfield. The crowd noise, even from players, spiked again. You could see the defense shaking their heads, unable to believe what they were seeing. And then came the fourth play, the one that would echo through every corner of the Browns facility long after practice ended. Shotgun formation, empty backfield. You could hear the quiet tension, that kind of silence that only happens right before something big. Shedeur took the snap, stepped up through collapsing pressure, and fired a dart across the middle. The receiver cut perfectly between two defenders, and the ball met him exactly in stride. Touchdown. The explosion that followed was unreal. Helmets flew, players screamed, coaches threw their hands up, half in disbelief, half in joy. Even the defense, fierce competitors just seconds earlier, couldn't help but shout their respect, because everyone on that field knew what they'd just seen. It wasn't luck, it wasn't hype, it was mastery. Shedeur Sanders had just marched his offense 70 yards in 4 plays. No mistakes, no hesitation, no doubt. He didn't spike the ball, he didn't celebrate. He just jogged back to the sideline, calm as ever, like he'd been doing this for years. His teammates, though, they couldn't contain themselves. Receivers swarmed him, linemen pounded his shoulder pads, coaches stared at each other, speechless. And across the field, Dillon Gabriel stood frozen near the 50-yard line, helmet dangling in his hand, watching, processing, realizing. Because in those 4 plays, Shedeur Sanders hadn't just scored, he had decided something that the coaches, the analysts, and even the front office hadn't been ready to admit yet. The quarterback competition was over, and the rookie had just taken the crown. The field was still buzzing when the offense regrouped, the kind of noise that isn't just excitement, it's energy trying to find somewhere to go. Players were laughing, yelling, replaying every detail of the drive in disbelief. The defense tried to keep their composure, but even they were grinning. Coaches pretended to jot down notes, but their faces gave it away. Nobody wanted to admit it out loud yet, but everyone knew. Something had shifted.
When Shedeur Sanders took off his helmet, you could see it in his expression. Calm, steady, untouched by the chaos around him. He wasn't celebrating, because to him, this wasn't a surprise. This was confirmation. The kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need validation because it's already proven. Meanwhile, across the field, Dillon Gabriel stood near the quarterback group, eyes fixed on the grass. No frustration, no outburst, just a quiet realization settling over him, the kind that stings worse than anger. Because no matter how hard you prepare, how many reps you take, how much tape you study, there's no competing with momentum. And right now, every ounce of it belonged to Shedeur. Then something subtle happened. The kind of moment that no stat sheet or press release will ever capture. The offensive line began drifting closer to Shedeur between drills. It wasn't deliberate, it wasn't planned, but suddenly, every time he picked up his helmet, they were there, waiting. Running backs hovered nearby, asking quick questions, listening closely. Receivers quietly shifted toward his side of the field, eager for reps with him. It wasn't favoritism, it was gravity. Leadership, the real kind, doesn't need to be announced. It pulls people in naturally. And that's exactly what Shedeur was doing. Not with speeches, not with bravado, but with performance and presence. He made people believe. The coaches noticed it too. One by one, they began moving closer during his reps, calling out feedback, but their tone had changed. It wasn't corrective anymore, it was curious. They were learning who this rookie really was, and it didn't match the scouting report. Even the front office staff watching from the sidelines started whispering quietly among themselves. Draft boards, evaluations, projections, all of it suddenly felt outdated. Because what they were seeing on that field wasn't a developmental prospect, it was a player who had already crossed that invisible line between potential and reality. The next few reps were shorter, lighter, more for cool-down than evaluation, but the energy stayed the same. Players leaned in during huddles, eyes on Shedeur. Nobody had to say it, but it was written in their body language, their tone, their respect. By the time practice ended, the difference was unmistakable. When the final whistle blew, players didn't scatter like usual. They clustered around one person, Shedeur Sanders. Talking, laughing, walking alongside him as they headed off the field. It was subtle but powerful, a visual representation of hierarchy realigning itself right in front of everyone. Gabriel followed a few steps behind, helmet dangling from one hand, face half hidden under his visor. The sound of laughter ahead of him grew softer with distance. No one said a word, but silence has a way of saying everything that needs to be said. And that's the thing about moments like this. There's never an announcement, never a press conference, never a single defining quote. Just a shift. One that begins quietly, grows naturally, and spreads through every corner of a locker room until it becomes undeniable. By the time they hit the tunnel, everyone in that building knew what had just happened. The Browns didn't just find their future quarterback that afternoon, they watched him take the job. Not because someone handed it to him, not because of hype, but because Shedeur Sanders earned it in the only language football ever truly respects: performance. When practice ended that day, the real chaos didn't unfold on the field, it happened upstairs. Inside the Browns facility, behind glass walls and closed doors, the performance everyone had just witnessed triggered an uncomfortable chain reaction. Because in theory, teams love competition. They praise meritocracy. They talk about earning it. But when a third-round pick like Dillon Gabriel, the quarterback some executives had personally vouched for, gets publicly outclassed by a rookie everyone said needed time, the conversation changes quickly. Front office staff started circling. Phones came out. Texts went flying. One executive reportedly muttered under his breath, "We're not ready for this yet." Not ready for this meaning the reality that Shedeur Sanders had just upended their entire quarterback plan and made the people who doubted him look foolish. For the scouts who pushed for Gabriel, this practice wasn't just a bad day, it was a credibility crisis. Months of draft meetings, hours of film breakdowns, analytics charts, all pointing to one conclusion: Gabriel was the safer investment. And in one afternoon, that safety net evaporated. You could almost feel the tension tightening around the front office, not because of what Shedeur did wrong, but because of how perfectly he performed.
Coaches, meanwhile, were caught in the middle. Their job was to develop both quarterbacks, keep things competitive, and stick to the plan. But plans don't survive moments like this. Every position coach saw it. Every coordinator felt it. When a rookie runs the offense cleaner than your designated starter, you can't hide it behind buzzwords or developmental excuses. It's right there, on film, in stats, in reactions. One assistant reportedly leaned toward the offensive coordinator during film review and said, quietly but seriously, "That's not a rookie out there." The room stayed silent. Then came the whispers, speculation swirling around the building faster than any official update could control. Some insiders began floating the idea of Shedeur getting reps with the first-team offense full-time. Others argued it was too soon, claiming the team had to protect the investment in Gabriel. But deep down, everyone knew what that meant: ego versus evidence. And ego never wins for long in the NFL. Outside the building, word started leaking. Reporters who had been at the practice couldn't contain it. Tweets popped up. Headlines followed. Rookie QB turns heads at Browns practice. Is a quarterback shift already happening in Cleveland? The tone was careful, but the implication was loud. By the next morning, local radio stations were already debating it. Talk shows questioned whether Gabriel's job was safe. Fans flooded comment sections, arguing over who should start. Some accused the media of overhyping it. Others said what everyone in the locker room already knew: Shedeur wasn't hype, he was the real thing. And then came the ripple effect nobody wanted to address: the politics. The general manager who backed Gabriel, he now had to justify the decision to ownership. The quarterback coach who built the offense around Gabriel's strengths, suddenly he had to explain why it ran smoother with a rookie calling the shots. The PR team, they were already preparing statements for questions that hadn't even been asked yet. Even inside ownership circles, the energy changed. The same executives who'd been criticized for drafting Shedeur too early were suddenly being congratulated for their bold vision. The narrative flipped overnight, from skepticism to validation. Because when you witness something undeniable, you can't unsee it. By the end of that week, practice footage had made its way through every level of the organization. Each replay was the same: calm footwork, perfect timing, composure under pressure. No flash, no panic, just dominance. The verdict was clear, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud yet. Shedeur Sanders wasn't a project. He was a problem. For defenses, for doubters, and for anyone in Cleveland still pretending there was a competition. And as front office meetings stretched late into the evening, one question hung heavy in the air: how long could they realistically keep this secret from the public? By the time Friday morning rolled around, the energy inside the Browns facility felt completely different. Nobody had to say a word. Nobody had to make an announcement. Everyone simply knew. The quarterback hierarchy that once looked neatly structured on paper was gone, replaced by something raw, undeniable, and earned. Shedeur Sanders didn't just compete for the job. He took it,
quietly and completely through performance so dominant that no press release or depth chart could disguise it. And that's the thing about football. It doesn't matter what round you're drafted in or how many scouts signed off on your name. The field is the ultimate truth serum. Between the white lines, reputation means nothing. Only results speak. And on that Thursday afternoon, Shedeur Sanders spoke louder than anyone else in the entire organization. While Gabriel studied film and processed what went wrong, Shedeur walked through the locker room with the kind of calm that only comes from certainty. Teammates approached him first now. Handshakes, pats on the shoulder, quiet words that carried weight. There was no grand ceremony, no official coronation, just quiet respect growing louder with every rep, every conversation, every look that said, "You're the guy now." The veterans felt it, the rookies felt it. Even the coaches, the ones still preaching competition in press conferences, felt it. They'd seen this story before, in every era of football. That rare moment when leadership doesn't need to be appointed. It's claimed. And for Shedeur, this wasn't new. This is what he was built for. From Jackson State to Colorado, from national scrutiny to NFL skepticism, every challenge he faced followed the same pattern. Doubt first, dominance after. That calmness, that quiet intensity, that refusal to force things, it all came together on that field.
But what makes this story powerful isn't just what happened, it's how it happened. There was no speech, no bravado, no highlight reel celebration. Just execution, over and over again. The kind of performance that forces an entire organization to stop, stare, and rethink everything they thought they knew. And if one practice could do this, if one afternoon could make coaches, executives, and players see the future that clearly, then imagine what happens when the lights turn on and the games actually count. Because what Cleveland witnessed that day wasn't hype, wasn't luck, and wasn't temporary momentum. It was something much rarer. A franchise quarterback revealing himself in real time. For the Browns, Thursday wasn't just another off-season practice. It was the day the future announced itself. Uninvited, unstoppable, and unforgettable. Shedeur Sanders didn't wait for permission. He didn't need validation. He just stepped onto that field and showed everyone who he already was. And from that moment forward, the Cleveland Browns weren't the same team anymore. They were his.